Hi students, good to see you again. This time we're doing a small lecturette and we're going to be covering chapters 12 and chapters 13. I'm going to go very fast because my child is out with his father at the park and they can walk through the door at any minute. So if you hear people in my house, just please forgive me. It's just my child and my husband coming home from the park. But okay, so what are we going to do? We are going to talk about this chapter, and when I say this chapter, I mean major minerals. So we've been talking vitamins, now we're going to talk minerals. So what's important about the minerals that I want you to get? So when we look at minerals, I want you to be thinking about these minerals. There's going to be quite a few of them. We're going to break them down into the major and the trace. Major meaning the larger ones and the trace meaning smaller ones. Okay, and so I am going to want you to be able to differentiate which ones are in which, and then there's going to be a few that we just aren't going to cover. So here I've bolded the ones that I am going to be covering. So it doesn't mean that sulfur, magnesium, and chloride are not important. It just means for the purposes of the exam, when I'm trying to get all of this into a testing environment, that these are the ones I feel that are a little bit more important for you to know, and then also to look at your personal diet and see if you can make changes. But when we talk about major minerals, what we're talking about is minerals that have at least 5 grams in the body. Okay, so when we start to look at our body mass and we look at what's going on, we know we have a lot of water in our body because you just had the water chapter, which I didn't do a lecturette on because it's very self-explanatory. But in the water chapter, we have, 60–75% of our body water. But what's the other parts? And so when we look at that, we know our bone, our skeletal system is an extremely large number. And so when we look at that, that's what we're saying here, that the calcium in our bones is greater than 5 milligrams of that mineral in our body. Okay, so these are the ones we're going to focus on: calcium, sodium, potassium, and phosphorus, that I think are important. Okay, and then the trace minerals that I'm going to get to in the next chapter are going to be just 3. Okay, 1, 2, 3. So we're going to talk about these, and we're going to talk about that we need to consume at least 20 milligrams per day, but that these are the ones that are in our body at less than 5 grams. So as far as iron in my body, it's a lower amount, less than 5, zinc and fluoride. Okay, so minerals in the body, for you that's visual learners, it's the same thing. Here's this demarcation line that's right here that's looking at these as far as the major and these as the trace. Okay, so interesting fact, we talked about the fact that the vitamins can easily be destroyed by heat and water and oxygen and all those things. These ones are not destroyed by any of those things. So that's kind of unique when we look at minerals. It's also why we can find them in our soil and they're still there. So anyways, excuse me. All right, let's start looking at some of these minerals and how important they are for our body. These are overall looking at, this is what minerals are going to be doing for your body. They're going to help with structure growth. They're going to participate in energy metabolism just like the vitamins did. They're going to be part of enzymes or cofactors that are precursors to other things that are going to happen. They're going to help maintain a healthy immune system as well. So just in addition to the vitamins that you need, you probably need to look at some of the minerals that you might need. Blood formation, we've already talked about clotting, things like that. These are also helping with blood formation, i.e. iron, red blood cells, oxygenation, all of those things. And then fluid and electrolyte balance, sodium, potassium, specifically one of the ones when we look at that. Okay, so the other thing that's interesting is that we want to maintain homeostasis, right? The body likes that homeostasis, that normalcy. And the body maintains tight control over mineral balance, and our GI tract is another thing that is very functional with that. And it regulates the absorption of food based on the body's needs. So minerals in gastric juices are sloughed off in the intestinal cells and are either excreted in the feces or reabsorbed through the large intestine. So this is something that's very unique with minerals that is, the body keeps on giving. So I just want you to kind of be aware of that. And then the kidneys can excrete excess, and they can also reabsorb minerals too. So from this perspective, we can reabsorb calcium and how important that is. But I also want to tell you one thing, for those of you when we get to the alcohol chapter that like to indulge in alcohol, one of the things that happens when you drink alcohol is that you have to pee, right? And so when you have to pee a lot all the time, then you're also actually going to be excreting lots of things from your kidneys. And one of those minerals is actually calcium. And so it can't reabsorb the way that it needs to if you're peeing all the time. So can someone who drinks a lot be at risk for lower calcium levels in the body? And the answer is yes. And so I want you to just spark up, listen, and hope you get something out of these lectures. And then the other thing that minerals do, when we talked about the sodium and potassium, is that this extracellular and intracellular process. So we're talking about sodium inside and outside of the cells, like how do we get things moving in and out and the role that they have for that. Okay, I'm gonna skip. This is that same kind of sheet that I was telling you about in the other chapter when we were looking at the fat soluble versus water soluble. I want you to know the name of the mineral. I want you to know the metabolic function. I want you to know how much your body needs. What are the food sources? Are there any toxicities? And are there any deficiencies that we should look at, or signs and symptoms for those? Okay, all right, so what is sodium? Sodium's our first one that we're gonna talk about. Sodium is usually combined with chloride as NaCl, which is table salt. So are sodium and table salt the same thing? This is that semantics. So NaCl is actually what accounts for 90% of the sodium consumed. So it isn't table salt that's being consumed necessarily, right? It's the how that they're putting sodium into products. It's not necessarily just the salt shaker at the table, and that's we'll talk about that in a minute. 40% of weight of salt is actually sodium, so 60% is chloride if you're doing the math on that. So 1 teaspoon of table salt actually gives you 2.4 grams of sodium. So keep that in mind when we're trying to convert and try to figure out, again, that it's not just the salt shaker. The salt shaker is very limited. It's really this 2.4 grams of sodium that gets into the product from the manufacturers for preserving processes. It's a lot more than that. And that's when it becomes problematic. So sodium is a major electrolyte, right? I think most people know that. That we need this in our body, and it is found in the blood and the extracellular fluid of the cell. So that means it's extra. It's on the outside and it's trying to get in. So we're trying to get it from the outside into the inside, okay? And it plays a role in the volume of our blood, right? And regulating blood volume that's going through, and we need homeostasis. We need it to be normal. We don't want people to have too much or not enough, okay? So this is kind of an important process in our body. And then we're going to talk about too, how most people are able to get enough sodium in their diet because it's found everywhere. But then that becomes problematic because then you talk about people and they're like, oh, I had too much sodium and I'm puffy, right? And so that's not what our body wants homeostasis. It doesn't want that. So how do we get that? How do we de-cleanse ourselves of that kind of thing? And that's where potassium comes in, but we'll talk about that one in a minute. Okay, so 95 to 100% is absorbed in the small intestine when we talk about sodium absorption, and 5% is actually excreted in our feces, so very small amount. So the rest of it's efficiently in our body, and that's why, again, if we're talking about taking in too much, how do we get rid of it? You know, that kind of thing. It can move freely in the blood. Blood levels are maintained by the kidney. So this is, again, this interesting thing where if we have someone who has a predisposition to not having good kidney function, can sodium be problematic? The answer is yes. Also, someone who's on dialysis because their kidney function is impaired, then this sodium becomes a big player in this process as well. And then we actually can lose a little bit of sodium through perspiration or like when we do sports and things like that. But the function of sodium is to regulate fluid balance, which we've said before. So let's keep moving. It can also help transmit nerve impulses, and it helps transport some nutrients. And the biggest one that most people are aware of is that it preserves food and enhances flavor. But what we're looking at here is just that it can be a transport carrier, that sodium can be a transport carrier for glucose to get from the outside into the cell, and then also to help it get out of the cell. It can get right out. Okay, so sodium can pass through. What is the K+? You guys remember that? Any thoughts? Okay. All right, so daily needs for sodium. So this is what I want you to look at. So when we look at this is the milligrams of sodium, not table salt, but sodium that people need. So this is where the recommendation is. The recommendation is set at 1,500 milligrams. The upper tolerable intake limit is set at 2,300. Does that mean if you go above that it's not good? Yeah, that's what that means. But at the same token, these ones, you're not going to die per se when you have it up, because most people have an average sodium consumption greater than 3,400 milligrams a day. So the average person's anywhere from 4, and I've seen it as high as 6,000 milligrams a day for the average person just eating normal food, okay? So we do want to get this down because it's a little too high, and we do know that, you know, hypertension is a precursor to a lot of these #1 killers among Americans, and so this can be problematic if we have too much volume of this, and it causes this hypertension that we're talking about. Okay, so when we talk about sodium, remember what we said, about 5% added during cooking and about 6% added at the table. So 12% of consumption comes from foods that are naturally containing sodium, but the 75% are coming from these processed foods. So this is where we have to be careful. So canned goods, cured meats, frozen or packaged meals, TV dinners, oh, huge amounts. Any of you like top ramen or the ramen noodles, right? Have you looked at the sodium content on that? They're very high. That's because it's a preservation factor, and partly because of the powder that they're putting into it. So maybe you could just use less of the little powder that you make for your top ramen. See if you'd be willing to do that after you look at the sodium content. Okay. So where am I going to find sodium? So this is where you start to look at this. Like, what's the difference here? If we're talking about a baked potato, someone's going to have a medium-sized baked potato, we're talking about 10 milligrams of sodium. Hash browns, though, if we're talking about that, and they're processed, 746. So it's why not make your own hash browns at that point, right? Just take a potato and shred it and just cook it. Okay, that's the difference that we're talking about here. So, think about it occurring naturally versus in the processed foods and how that looks, okay? All right, now sodium content in selected foods. So this is where you're gonna see things that spike really high that are gonna get you there really, really fast. And if you like pickles, so you're like, that's the only way I'll eat a cucumber. Well, if that's the case, you're gonna get a lot of sodium along with the nutrients that you wanted to get out of the cucumber, okay? So keep this in mind as to how we can actually kind of cut down on some of the sodium. So if I have too much sodium, what is it gonna do? Hypertension, especially with a salt sensitivity. So not everybody is as sensitive to salt as one thinks. And so it's a little bit more of a just genetic factor here that says some people are gonna be more salt sensitive. But we know that the elderly people or people with diabetes or chronic disease, and we definitely know that African Americans have a huger predisposition to being hypertensive. It's just how it is, okay? Just like certain ethnic disparities for different diseases. So we really need to watch this because they tend to have a little bit, a much higher, actually, I should say, rate for having hypertension. And then there's something called hypernatremia. So again, hyper is high, and Na is what? Sodium, and emia is in the blood. So it's excessive sodium in the blood, okay? And it occurs when fluids are not replenished, when water is lost for vomiting and diarrhea. So this can be, it can happen to someone who, drank too much and was throwing up. They can become hypernatremic, where they can have excess sodium in the blood because we didn't replenish them from the water that was lost because they had vomiting or diarrhea. Okay, so it happens. That's probably how it would happen to most of you, or food poisoning or something like that. You can also get too much sodium that's ingested without adequate intake. So you just, like no one I think would really truly do this unless they did it on dare, but just taking like spoons of salt, right? Just ingesting them and having any other adequate intake. Then of course you're gonna have that. But also someone who has a really, really high processed food diet could be that one. Okay, and what is it going to do? So here's one of the things it's going to do. It's going to cause calcium deficiency and osteoporosis. I talked about alcohol doing this, but sodium can do the same thing. So if we have someone who has a diet that's in high processed food and is drinking alcohol a lot, which i.e. could be the college student's dream, right? No, and it could be the college student's diet in this case. So what does that mean? So that can be problematic. Also, if we have people that are doing fluid retention, or trying to invoke weight gain, or have stomach ulcers and stomach cancer. So that's the things that can contribute to excess sodium in the diet. Okay, so how do you reduce sodium in the diet though? There's something called the DASH diet. So if you haven't heard of it, it stands for Dietary Approaches to Stopping Hypertension, DASH. And it's very similar to the Mediterranean diet. And which is really good because we've seen the studies, we've seen even the videos I showed you of how the Mediterranean diet is just, taking over and really, has some really good scientific data behind it. This is very similar to that. So it's really getting this balance in that's, and it's also emphasizing low fat, low saturated fat, cholesterol and sweets. And it's highlighting high whole grains, vegetables, and legumes. Is this not what we've just been saying like this whole time that we've had this whole class? Is like, you know, increase our fruits and vegetables a little less and make sure they're whole grains, this kind of thing. So this is that same approach, except it's even more like on steroids. It actually wants you to have a boatload of fruits and vegetables. So I normally, this diet is a great diet, but if someone can't even get, you know, 1 or 2 fruits and vegetables in a day, then this isn't the diet that I'm going to be like pushing them for. I'm going to try to get them closer to getting more and more fruits and vegetables, more whole grains, and then I'm going to really talk to them about the principles of the diet. So what else can we do? So here's what you want to do. Low sodium, if we're looking at the label, would be less than 140 milligrams. Sodium free can have up to 5 milligrams. Remember, just like the trans fats and fat free, when we talk about the regulations, it can have up to 5 milligrams. So it's not fully sodium free, but again, still going to have a lot less than when we talk about how much. And then reduced sodium just means that it's going to be 25% less than whatever the regular version of that is. And then if it says light in sodium, it's 50% less than the regular version. But be careful, because some people's semantics on the light, they want it weight-wise versus volume-wise, and it becomes problematic. Okay. Limited consumption of processed foods is really going to be the best way to do it. And then trying to season foods with herbs and sodium-free seasonings is really what we try to tell people, or using products like Mrs. Dash, although sometimes Mrs. Dash can be problematic as well. Okay. So do we have sodium deficiency in the United States? It's very rare. It can happen, but not in healthy individuals because they're eating so much processed food. So individuals, though, that consume too much water in a short period of time can get hyponatremia. So, you know, we learned this in the water chapter, like water can be toxic as well if you have too much of it. So some of that could be headaches, muscle fatigue, and seizures, and it can cause death. So we have to be very careful with that. And it does, when it really happens like this, is someone who has, it says it cures with diuretic use. So again, for my nursing students, when you have patients in the hospital that are taking Lasix or furosemide, that is the diuretic to take all of the fluid off of their body, right? And usually when we have someone who has high blood pressure, that's gonna happen as well. We give them something like that. Okay, sorry about that. I'm doing 2 things at once and recording other things. Okay, let's talk about potassium. Okay, potassium, what is the best thing about potassium? What I love about potassium is that it is the major cation found in intracellular fluid. So if someone does have a diet that's high in sodium, guess what I want them to also have a diet high in? Potassium, okay? Because if it's fluid, it can help draw. They can just balance each other out. So sodium and potassium are great together, right? But the problem is that if you go and you look at your diet, your sodium level was probably really, really high, but was your potassium? No, it was actually really low. So they're not doing the job. They're not able to jive with each other the way that they need to. So we need to have sodium with potassium, right? So it's absorbed in the small intestine. The colon, kidneys maintain balance by excreting through the urine, and major minerals are lost in sweat. Okay, so what can potassium do for me? So here is what the metabolic functions are, that it actually helps maintain that fluid balance, just like I was saying, sodium, potassium. It helps with muscle contraction and nerve conduction. So here's the other thing, is that if people are like, you know, man, my muscles, I'm sore, I'm getting all these like weird feelings, then they always say, oh, have a banana, right? And this is what they're going for, was the potassium part. Although, do keep in mind that a baked potato has more potassium than a banana does. But you have to eat the skin of the baked potato. Okay. Now, it can help lower blood pressure. So here's something naturally. So when I have patients that are like, I don't want to take a pill for my blood pressure, then what I'm going to make sure that they understand is that they need to get a lot of potassium in their diet. Okay. And that can really help. It acts as a buffer in the blood. It can preserve calcium and phosphorus in the bones, which we haven't talked about yet, but that's so important. And it can help reduce kidney stones. So also, if you have someone who has a history of kidney stones, you really want to check their diet and make sure that they're getting enough potassium. Now, can potassium be problematic? Yeah, it can also, because have you heard that potassium can stop the heart? So can there be toxicity? I want you to hold that thought a minute, but right now I want you to look at this and figure out where you were. So you looked at your diet analysis. You had to tell me where you were. My guess is that you were low. Okay, and how can you get more? So these are the foods. The good news is, again, when we start to look at it, it's a gamut of all of them. It's not just fruits, it's not just vegetable. It's in almost every area of my plate that you can get. So there's no reason why we can't get more in our diet. Okay, so Now, can it be toxic? Yes. So it's called hyperkalemia, right? So too much potassium in the blood. So that is a problematic. It does not occur with food intake. So this isn't something if I had a bunch in my diet that it's going to cause my heart to stop. But if you're taking a supplement, it can be problematic. So, and or the salt substitutes. That's where I mentioned the sometimes Mrs. Dash and some of these other ones might have a salt substitute. And so sometimes what they sub in is potassium. And so it can get a little high. But what will lead to is irregular heartbeat, heart damage, and death. So I don't remember when we talked at the beginning of the semester and I said, you know, for those of you that if you want to stop eating fast food, what you should do is go to YouTube and watch an open heart surgery. Well, when they have the open heart surgery, when they stop the heart and they do the bypass, how they stop the heart is they use potassium. So yes, it's dangerous. Okay, it can be problematic, but I'm not really worried because most people don't get enough, but it can happen. Okay. All right, so deficiency means hypokalemia. So same thing, but hypo is low, right? And so it's too little potassium in the blood, and it has an increased risk for hypertension. So again, that's my point with the sodium and potassium, right? That most people that have hypertension, if we can get them on getting more potassium in their diet, the hypertension gets better. So that's something to think about. Okay, calcium. This is one of my favorite ones to talk about. Folate and calcium are the ones that I think when you guys are trying to figure out, I know it's hard because some of these things are like diseases that will happen later on in life. These are ones that are happening right now. That you only build bone mass for calcium, like your calcium stores, your savings account that we talk about, up to age 30. After that, whatever you have in your body is what you are going to have and carry with you the rest of your life. So when we start to look at how important calcium is for you right now, it's very important. So when you went to look at your diet analysis and you were looking at yours, where were you at with calcium? Were you low? And part of it might be because you're not able to tolerate milk, okay? So we need to look at this and figure out how are we gonna get enough calcium because you are only gonna get bone mass up until age 30. So some of you might be starting to approach 30 at some point, and then it stops, okay? And so there's really no other way after 30. Well, there's a couple, but really for the most part, you can't. Okay, so this is the 99% of the body's calcium is located in the bones and teeth, but that's not what the importance of calcium is in our body. What is the importance of calcium in our body? What does it do for us? Why do we have to have it? Everybody knows it's we store it in our bones and it's a great savings account, but what do we have to have? What muscle in our body or organ has to have it all of the time? And that is our heart, okay? It goes like this. It has to beat all the time, okay? And so when we look at calcium, we have to have a heartbeat all the time. And if we're not getting enough in our blood from our food, where's our body gonna get it? Our body is then going to take it from where? Our bones, our savings account. And again, I can only build that up until I'm 30. And then after that, I can't. Oh no, there we go, okay. All right, so bioavailability, what does that mean? So that means how much of the food that I eat is actually going to be absorbable calcium. So this is kind of an interesting thing I want you to look at, is that when you look at the percentage, that milk and the lactose and the things that we talk about for people being lactose intolerant, they're in the middle. So what that means is there are products that can actually get greater than 40% absorption. And these are dark green leafy vegetables. So but broccoli's on there. Most people will do broccoli, but some people can't do kale, right? But so if you can find dark green leafy things and eat them, you're going to get better bioavailability of the calcium than you would from having milk. So that's a good news for some of you that can't tolerate milk very well. Find the foods like this that you're willing to eat. Okay, and then there's a couple that are not. So spinach actually, on the other hand, is less than 10%. So then you're better off if you're talking about picking a salad and you're doing a salad, then find kale and do it with some romaine lettuce or something, because you're gonna be better off than the spinach, okay? Just from the calcium perspective, okay. Uh-oh. Will it work? Okay, absorption. So low blood calcium increases calcium absorption. So that is one thing that can happen, is that when your body really needs calcium and it's starving for it, then your body's calcium receptor sites get opened up a little bit more and it's easier to absorb. So it's that percentage that we were looking at, it might be easier for milk to be absorbed. You might actually get greater than 40% of that calcium in that milk being absorbed during a time in which you have low calcium blown levels. So our body is an amazing thing that it does and adapts this way automatically. Okay, this is that homeostasis that we're talking about with the bones. This is what we were talking about earlier, where I was talking about osteoporosis and I was talking about the density of our bones. So I want you to take a look at this. So when you start to look at this, when we start to look at how important, this is that the spongy type of bone here, right? But we need it to still be very dense, right? It's inside of the bone. It's more sensitive to changes in dietary calcium, and we need this to be as dense as possible. So take a look at this. Okay, we've already said this. Calcium's role is muscles, nerve, hormones I didn't talk about. So it can actually help release and activate certain hormones. So that's important. Blood vessel dilation and constriction. So that's actually like the vasodilator that can be helpful with people that, need to open up their blood, like if they have hypertension and stuff like that. Calcium is very helpful with this. And then blood clotting. Okay, so I'm trying to get to, here it is. This is what I really want you to see, and then we'll go back to those other ones. So this is what we're talking about. When we have someone who has osteoporosis, this is what we're talking about. We want that spongy stuff to be as spongy as possible, but at some point, what happens to it? There's like holes in it. And so then it actually gets crushed, right? So it's most likely the weight of something. So it's always kind of funny when someone says, like an old person, oh, I fell and broke my hip. They probably didn't. Their hip broke and it caused them to fall. It's usually the reverse of what typically happens. Now, some people will actually trip and fall, but usually the bone just gave out, right? It just couldn't handle the muscle at that particular, or the weight at that particular point, and it just crashed. Okay, so now we'll go back. Okay, so calcium may lower high blood pressure. We already talked about. Prevent colon cancer, which is a #1 killer among males. Okay, not #1, but it's in the top 5. Okay, it can reduce the risk of kidney stones. So again, someone who's got a history of kidney stones, this might be something to be helpful. And can reduce the risk of obesity. Yes, there's actually a study that shows if you actually have 3 glasses of milk a day, you're less likely to be overweight. So interesting on that note. Okay, so adequate intake is 1,000 milligrams depending on your age. So some are going to be a little bit more, but we want to get at least 1,000 milligrams of calcium. Americans fall short. It's usually less than 800. What was yours? I'm asking you for your diet analysis and for your infographic that you actually go through with these. So when you look at the calcium, where can you get it? Again, it's mostly in your dairy product, but there's going to be some other places in which you can get calcium. So start to take a look at that and see if you can't get that. You've got orange juice that's got it fortified in. Soy milk has it fortified in. So almonds and almond milk will have it fortified in. So find it in your food sources because it's extremely important for the body. And is there an upper tolerable intake limit? Yeah, 2,500. So don't take too many supplement pills because it can be problematic. However, I'm going to talk about they're not really absorbed at that particular rate anyways. So we'll get into that in a minute. Toxicity for hypercalcemia. It's just too much calcium in the blood. You can have constipation. You're going to have bone pains because it's trying to absorb and do its thing. Muscle weakness, mental confusion, and it can impair the absorption of iron, zinc, magnesium, and phosphorus. So then you throw everything else off. So we don't want to have too much of it. But again, most people are not getting enough. And I actually think that they need to get more. So this is that osteoporosis that I was showing you before. Now, when should an individual take calcium? Well, this is what I'm going to tell you, is that if you are not getting enough calcium in your diet right now and you're lactose intolerant, you're probably not going to be able to get enough calcium in your diet just from diet alone. And so you might actually need a supplement now. And so this might be that one where you food first, but you may have to supplement, okay? Now, not all calcium is created equal. And so what I mean by that is that there's different types of calcium supplements available on the market. So when you start to look at the calcium supplements, there's going to be one called calcium carbonate. There's going to be one called calcium citrate. There's going to be one called calcium gluconate. There's actually tons. But they have different recommendations. But calcium carbonate, you have to consume with meal. Calcium citrate, you can take any time of the day, and it's best for those 50 and older. But either one of these have a variable absorption rate. And I think that my next slide will show you, but this says consume in doses less than 500 milligrams or less. So if you go to pick out a calcium supplement, there's going to be some that are going to be 800 and there's going to be some that are 500. You should probably pick the 500 because they're more likely to be actually absorbed better than the 800. You're just buying more expensive stuff and not getting the bang for your buck. And then there's calcium from unrefined oyster shell, bones, some of those that are out on the market. Those probably still, in my opinion, aren't the best. And then the biggest thing I want you to know is if you're going to take a calcium supplement and you're also taking an iron supplement, you don't take them at the same time. You need to take them space them out at least 2 hours apart. Okay. And then sometimes when you do take this supplement, it can cause constipation and flatulence. So who knows, maybe you just want to try to build your lactose tolerance back up. Remember, because I said it's going to have the same problem. Okay, so I didn't put it in here. Ingesting calcium. I usually have a little thing in here about the percentages. Well, here's what I want you to know is that when you take a calcium supplement, that usually about 60% is absorbed. And so if you're taking a calcium supplement that's 500 milligrams, so I'm getting my calculator out. So 500 times 60%, that's only 300 milligrams. You probably can't see that. It's 300 milligrams, okay? So that's all you're getting. So remember, if you need 1,000 a day, this one calcium supplement is probably just gonna be equivalent to a glass of milk, okay? So you might actually have to take more than one supplement. But I don't think, again, no one's gonna get to the upper toxicity level. So keep that in mind. Look for something that's about 500. Calcium, in my mind, calcium citrate probably is a better one than calcium carbonate, calcium gluconate. Okay. All right. Phosphorus. So is phosphorus important? Yes. Where do you get it? So I think now what I've done is you guys can understand now where I'm emphasizing on each one of these, and I think you can kind of do them on your own. But so what I'm going to just do is kind of skip around now and see if there's anything that I want to pull out that I think. Here's the osteoporosis. So we're going to get into this for just a second because we were just doing the calcium. So this is what I was telling you is that you get peak bone mass occurring in the 20s. And some can be added into the 30s, but you begin to lose bone mass by age 30, mid 30s, okay? So you wanna get the most in your savings account as you possibly can. And now is the time for you to do that. It's actually right now. So it's important. I want you to look at your calcium levels, see if there's any way, if you were low, how you can do this. This is that kind of look at when it's important. It's important as a baby because you have to grow, right? But then once you're in a kind of in what we would call this like adult year, guess what happens? It's going to start going, oops, I didn't need to do that. It's going to start going down. Okay. So, and then you're going to end up like this poor old lady, and no one wants to be that lady in the store. Okay. Now I have to get back out of here. Okay. So there's different types of osteoporosis just based on severity. So there's type 1 or type 2. And that it can be problematic either way. But what we do to test people, if anybody's interested, I don't think that the health center has one of these, but it's a DEXA scan. I know that the kidney majors actually have this, and so sometimes they recruit people to actually do this. But if you want to know your bone density, this might be to look at this. So we have this thing we call a T-score, and so it might be a good idea to watch this, especially if you're in your 20s, to then look at it again in your 30s, and then to look at it again in your 40s, and so on. Usually an endocrinology office has this DEXA scan that you can do. So the role of our diet is to have achieve peak bone mass. And so what do we need? We need to have adequate amounts of calcium, but we also need what I tell you earlier in the other lecture, vitamin D, okay? It's also very helpful to have omega-3 fatty acids and how important they are in our diet. Where do you get those? You guys remember? Hopefully some of you are thinking fish, okay? Weight-bearing exercises. So this is important because if you have weight-bearing exercises, then the muscles that can protect some of these bones can be stronger in structure. And unfortunately, your muscles atrophy as you get older, right? You don't move, you lose, right? And so in this case, we really want to keep our muscles going and doing weight-bearing exercises so that we can hold up our frame of our body so that we're putting weight on our not only our joints, obviously, but then these bones and causing these bones to just crack, like I was talking about. And that's usually what happens to someone when they think they fell. Really, their bone just cracked, and then it caused them to take a fall. Okay, so, and then the other thing that's helpful is an adequate intake of potassium and magnesium to promote bone health. And then also vitamin K can reduce hip fractures. And so this is important. So when we look at a diet, it's really good to have an overall diet in all of these things, which is why we wanted you to do this diet analysis as a project, is to look at every one of these and understand, how important this really is. Okay, some other things that are gonna, factors that reduce bone mass. So excessive intakes of supplementation of vitamin A can increase your risk for hip fracture. So again, I told you that people that hear that vitamin A is gonna be this great antioxidant, or that it's gonna help them with their eyesight, and they're afraid, and they need to, they wanna pass the driving test and whatever. And so they take a boatload of this vitamin A supplement, and then they're gonna actually be more at risk for having a hip fracture. And unfortunately, the one statistic that I do wanna share with you is that for those folks that have a hip fracture, the odds of dying after a hip fracture within the year is very strong. And I mean strong. Like, let me see if it's in here. No, it's not in there, but it's upwards of like 70% of people who have a hip fracture die within the first year. So it's a big deal. And then high doses of vitamin C have had mixed results in science about this. So there might be something there, there might not, but again, it said high doses, and most of you probably didn't even get the RDA of it. So, which is only 70 or 90 for those of you. So don't worry too much about that, but it can happen. Now, exercise does improve bone mass. So we said weight-bearing exercises, even as you get older. High impact exercise can increase also, and it helps also with some of the bone mineral stuff that is important during early adolescence. So if you've got brothers and sisters, make sure they're getting their calcium, okay? Exercise is always a good thing, right? And then it can improve the strength that I talked about, and then the mass as well. Body weight does impact bone mass as well. So overweight can promote greater bone mass density in the hip and spine compared to healthy weight individuals. So that might be something to think about, at least in this case, is that actually being overweight is going to get greater bone mass density. But bone loss during weight loss, you can have that. So if someone is overweight and then tries to lose weight, what I want them to know is that they might be losing some of that, like some of that, what they would call weight is actually their bone weight. And so that's important. So adequate calcium intake while they're trying to lose weight is very important as well. So if someone's trying to lose weight, I want to also make sure that their calcium levels are good, so that that's not happening and that they're actually losing fat weight, not, bone mass. Okay. Smoking can significantly lower your bone mass, and so it's another reason. Vaping is going to be the same. Alcohol intake, excessive alcohol intake is associated with osteoporosis, and that's what I was telling you about earlier when I was alluding to, if you drink a lot of alcohol, it makes you pee more, and as you have to pee more, then you're peeing out all that calcium really fast. Your body doesn't have an opportunity, the kidney doesn't have an opportunity to reabsorb all of that, so keep that in mind. And then moderate consumption may have a positive effect on bone mass density. So moderate, though, is here where we're talking about. So one of the things that we learned about, alcohol is that, it can decrease your risk for cardiovascular disease, but it doesn't in the age group from 20 to 30. Why do you think that is? Studies are indicating that people between the 20s and 30s don't understand moderate intake. So moderate intake is not what college students typically have. So I guess that's what I'm getting at. But if you do happen to have alcohol and you're doing it in a moderate consumption, then it could have some effect on that as well as being actually helpful. Okay, so I am all done now with the vitamins, the minerals of the major, and now we need to get to the trace. So I still have one more slide to show you, and then we will be all done. Okay, so trace minerals, which ones did we say we were going to get to on this one? Remember, I said there's only going to be a few of them. Iron, zinc, and there was one more, fluoride. Okay, so less than 5 milligrams of trace minerals in the body. We already said that. Dietary needs are less than 20 milligrams a day, so it's just a really small amount. And the bioavailability of this one can vary according to nutritional status. And that's what I was talking about earlier about like the calcium. And if your calcium levels are low, the body's absorption gets stronger. Well, the same thing happens with these. Specifically, the one I'm talking about is iron. So when someone is really low in iron, the body's iron store ability to take the stores is so much better during those times. I think that's amazing about our body. And also maybe the bioavailability of other foods eaten, like when we talk about about the iron and the vitamin C and how that actually increases the absorption. So that's something to think about. Sometimes there's certain foods that can actually decrease the absorption as well. And then it does need minimal digestion for absorption. So that's important to understand. And then some are recycled, such as iron. So your body just keeps recycling its iron and its protein source. I mean, it's amazing when we start to look at some of this stuff. Okay, so let's just try to jump into this. I've already showed you before, so I'm skipping that. This just helps you with the learning at what is iron. So it is the most abundant mineral on Earth and the most abundant trace mineral, not a major mineral, the most abundant trace mineral. So of the trace minerals, iron is the greatest, okay? And it is the most common nutrient deficiency in the world. Overall, when we look at all the different nutrients, this is the one. This is the one we focus on, because it has the highest in the world. But also when we say in the world, we have to understand there's third world countries and there's other things that might be skewing some of that data. But iron deficiency anemia is common, and is common most in women of childbearing years and children. So we mostly see this in children ages 0 to like 8, and then also again in women. And there's two forms of iron that I want you guys to be aware of. It's heme iron and non-heme iron. I talked about that very briefly. But the heme iron is the plant sources, right? It's found in the animal, excuse me, yeah, it's not the plant source. My apologies. That's how bad it is today. In the animal sources. So it's going to be animal sources, meat, poultry, and fish. And it's got what we call ferrous iron in it, where this one has ferric iron. So they're a little bit different. And this is non-heme iron, and this is the one that's found in the grains, vegetables, and it's 80% of iron that's consumed in foods comes from non-heme iron. So which one is better absorbed? Heme iron is better absorbed. Non-heme iron is not. But if we use the non-heme iron, but we have it with the vitamin C enhancement, then it becomes more absorbable. So this is something to think about in their bioavailability. So when we look at this, what is this talking about? It's talking about non-heme iron absorption is enhanced with vitamin C. And then again, meat, fish, and poultry are just much more bioavailable overall, and they're just absorbed better. Okay, so here's enhanced iron absorption and decreased enhanced iron absorption. So something to think about here when we start to look at what is going to decrease the amount of iron absorption that one has. The use of antacids might be one, especially if someone's taking a lot of antacids because they're having heartburn all the time and they need to control it better. And I think, remember what I was telling you about the antacids when we got into that, we were looking at how it actually just, it's kind of cyclical, and that it's kind of suppressing the HCl, but then the HCl just kind of turns on because it thinks you're taking that to suppress it, then it pushes more out, and it's very cyclical that way. And then this one, if we have people that drink a lot of coffee or tea, that can actually decrease your iron intake as well. So for someone, maybe an athlete who does like to enjoy Starbucks but might have a lower iron level, this is something that I want them to be aware of, is that if they're having coffee or tea, that might actually be decreasing the absorption. So we want to keep that in mind. So again, increasing absorption, vitamin C is usually the best thing. This is just the transport of iron. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about that. This is the iron recycling. 95% of iron in the body is recycled and reused. I think that's amazing. So iron is something that our body can keep working with, just like protein, where we have the protein pool and the amino acids and all that stuff. So, you know, this is just great. Most iron losses are going to occur from bleeding. So when we have someone who's anemic, it is typically because of bleeding. And sometimes when we have someone who is anemic, it doesn't fit like the normal bleeding circumstances where we can ask them, you know, like, even do you have blood in your stools, and they don't have any of that. Sometimes the only other thing, if it's not bleeding, is sometimes certain cancers feed on iron. And so sometimes if they're very low, this is in our elderly population, if they're very anemic and we can't find it, one of the things the doctors start looking for is cancer in different areas, because that might be the other reason as to why it's low. Okay, participates in oxidation reduction reactions. So it's the major compound of hemoglobin and myoglobin. So when you start to look at this, this whole process, I think most of you know, the bigger picture here that I just want you to get out of it is that iron really helps with the transportation of oxygen, right? And so how much of a player it is in this oxygenation of our blood and how important that is. And of course, if we don't have it, then what's going to happen is that we're going to feel tired. In addition to that, we might actually be decreasing our immune function. So it's needed for all of these things. So again, right now, iron is a big deal. However, the people that typically have low iron really have to do with the fact that they've had some kind of large blood loss. And of course, when we look at this, then we at least look at the females that are having menses, and that is blood loss. And so they might be more at risk for having that as well, just from having their menses. So it is something for us to think about and look at our diet. And I want you guys to look at your iron and see where you're at with that. Do you need to get more iron in your diet? It helps with brain function. Yeah, that's why we get so worried about it in kids. If it doesn't, if we could really hurt when their brain is developing the most, when we talk about babies and infants and toddlers and, moving on in that realm of things, if they aren't getting enough, it can really mess up their brain development. So that's important function of iron and why we need to find it and screen in those early childhood years. So how much do you need? You need 19, if you're 19 to 50, 18 milligrams for females and only 8 for males. So yes, this menstrual cycle thing really does make a difference, because look at this, after menopause, after a woman no longer has her menses, she goes back down to 8 too. So it is a big deal. The other thing to think about is that the needs of vegetarians are 1.8 times higher than those of non-vegetarians. So when I want someone who is vegetarian to understand some of their dietary differences, this is one of the big ones that I want to make sure that they understand, is that their need for iron is much higher. Because they're not eating foods, and they're eating a lot of these plant-based ones that are just not absorbed as well. And that's why having that vitamin C source with it to help the absorption is always important. So here's some sources of irons. So you can look at it. So there's some that are, animal-based, and then there's some that's not. And so here's to look at, like, even if it was not animal-based, so this is plant-based, what could you have? You could have, let's see here. You could be having some pasta. You can have whole wheat pasta, which would be like white bread, and it actually would have some iron in it. And then what you would want to do with that is that you would want to have some sauce, some pasta sauce, right? And in that pasta sauce, the tomato sauce that you were having, what is tomatoes are high in vitamin C. Hopefully you know that. And so that vitamin C source with that pasta that you're having would actually enhance or increase the absorption of that. So that's kind of how that works. You could also still have a really big steak, right? If you wanted to eat meat, and then have a baked potato with it, because it also has vitamin C. So, that works as well. So, but the need is really when we consume that plant-based stuff. So can you get toxicity from iron? So yes, the upper tolerable intake limit is 45 milligrams. And what it will lead to is liver disease if you do have too much of it. So because your liver is your detoxifier, right? It's trying to take it all out, and it just becomes problematic. You don't want to abuse your liver. Some of the symptoms are constipation, though, nausea, and vomiting. When you start to take in iron supplements, the number one symptom of an iron supplement is constipation. So keep that in mind as well, that you're likely to, once you start this, to have constipation. Can you get iron poisoning in children? Yes, it's accidental, where they've actually got a hold of too much of the supplement and taken it, and it can lead to death in kids that are young, under the age of 6. But for the most part, we get something just called iron overload, which is not good, but it's something we can deal with. We just have to get the iron out. But the problem is that it, stays in our system a little while, so we have to flush it out. Okay. So other effects of too much iron might be stimulate free radical production. So it may contribute to heart disease, and it may increase the risk for cancer if you take in too much of that. So we don't want people to take in more iron than they actually need, but most people are not. Most people are not getting enough. So I'm not so worried about that. It's deficiency part. Okay, so who typically doesn't get enough? So pregnant women, because they're building a baby, they're building a blood supply of this whole new fetus, right? And so they need more iron to do this. And then menstruating women and teenage girls, especially those that might have more of what we would call heavy blood losses or heavy menses, they definitely need more. And preterm or low birth weight infants could also use some. And then older infants and toddlers, typically what happens is that with the infants, they are either, if they're breastfed, they're getting a supplement. If they're not, they're getting a boatload in their formula because it's so hard to be absorbed that they have to pump it full of it. But then we take away the formula and they start drinking milk, and guess what? Milk doesn't have any iron in it. So that can be problematic as well. Or at least, be a risk for a deficiency of not having it anymore because they had it. Okay, and so that I think is it for iron that I want to talk about. We're now going to talk about zinc because I've talked about zinc before and how it promotes wound healing, right? So I want you to keep in mind that vitamin C, zinc, and those amino acids, the conditionally essential amino acids, are very good for wound healing. So that's why we were going to talk about zinc. It also helps with the immune system as well. So let me see if I can find what I really want you to see. Is the zinc is also recycled just like the iron is. So again, your body's just an amazing little vessel here. Okay, helps to heal wounds. Okay, it's needed for DNA and RNA synthesis. So it actually turns genes on and off. And so that's something as we get further down this road of nutrigenomics that I think is going to be, quite interesting. And then of course, keeping the immune healthy. And so it may reduce the duration of a common cold. So I don't know, again, I, don't know a whole lot about COVID, but, as research starts to, possibly ramp up with this, although maybe it won't, because if we all get the immunity or they come up with something, we won't need to worry about this. But if not, then we might want to know if, this is going to be something that's going to, help, or did someone's zinc status or, immunity status of the health of their body because of the diet that they had, help them hold off COVID versus, some of the ones that had a little bit more of like the compromised immune systems and chronic diseases and things like that. So anyways, can reduce inflammation, which is also, it causes, when we have inflammation and stress, it causes more free radicals and, can cause more problems for our body. It can improve taste perception. So that's the other thing, is that sometimes people will tell me that they don't taste things as well. And so this can actually help improve that. If they're complaining of that, maybe they have a low zinc level. And then it may prevent age-related macular degeneration. Remember that? That's the one where I'm telling you, if you want to feel like you're old, what you want to do is you want to take some sunglasses or glasses and you want to put a big old piece of tape over it. And then you want to try to walk around the house like that, because that's what macular degeneration is. Nobody wants that. Okay. All right. So this can't be the end of it. I must just be stopped. Okay. So how much do you need? Females, 8 milligrams. Males, 11. And most people meet their daily needs. The only people that really truly don't, or we see the most, is the vegetarians. And that's primarily because zinc foods are mainly animal sources. And so it's really hard to get zinc into your diet if it's not in an animal source. And so that's why the vegetarians are usually less. So as you can see, again, here is all of your, animal type sources, but then there are some things that can get zinc. And so the vegetarians need to know these are some things in which they need to make sure that they're getting into their diet to help with their zinc. And then also, again, if I have someone who has a wound and I'm trying to get it to heal, I'm going to increase the zinc. So the toxicity level is 40 milligrams per day. And if I get close to that, then it's going to be stomach pain, nausea, and vomiting. But it's not going to happen from food. It's only going to happen from supplements. Now, in excess, it can interfere with copper absorption. It can actually suppress the immune system, which might be what I was trying to help with. And it can lower the HDL. Remember, the HDL is the healthy cholesterol. You want that number higher. And this is actually going to lower it. So we don't want to do that. So we don't want to have zinc toxicity. But again, most people don't get enough zinc. Well, most people don't have a deficiency, nor do they have a toxicity. So I shouldn't say that, because most people eat meat. But for someone who doesn't eat meat, then we might need to start looking at one of those things. So if we do have a zinc deficiency, these are the things that can happen. And so how we typically find out that someone has a zinc deficiency is pretty much because of the hair loss. So when I do a human physical exam on people, nutrition-focused physical exam, I actually pull their hair and I see if any of their hair comes out. And if no hair comes out, that's a good thing, right? They might also have a loss of appetite. Remember that sense of taste. They might have diarrhea. Oh, they might have delayed sexual maturation. So this is, again, like in our kids that we're looking for in our adolescents. Impotence in our men, and a skin rash. So those are going to be some of the things that we might have from a deficiency perspective. So keep those in mind. Now we're not going over selenium, I think. Fluoride is the only other one I want you guys to see, and that is because it is important because it also helps maintain our bones. So this calcium and vitamin D, the other thing that I want you to know is that fluoride is important, but the good news, at least in Fresno, is that our water is fluoridated. And so we should have enough fluoride in our water that it wouldn't be a concern. But if you also go to some of the other areas, you might want to check if the water is fluorinated where you're at, but these are the amounts that you need to have. Or the other thing I think we've been looking at is there's a lot of people that are they're drinking bottled water. And so because they're replacing the bottled water and the bottled water is not fluorinated, then they might be at risk. But I can tell you if like people, I think it's Dasani, pretty sure it's Dasani, gets their water from Sacramento Municipal, their water is actually fluorinated. So you don't have to worry if you drink Dasani. So the upper tolerable intake limit is 10 milligrams. Some of the food sources that it would be fluorinated water and beverages made with fluorinated water. So the other part might be then if you're drinking Kool-Aid and you're using the sink water, then you're okay. Just use less sugar, right? Okay, decaffeinated tea leaves might be, but this is what happens. So toxicity is actually going to cause something like this on the teeth. So I don't know if I'm saying this right, fluorosis. I'm not a dentist, but this can typically happen. So again, when we do a human nutrition physical exam, these are something that I'm looking at. I actually have them stick their tongue out and I actually look at their teeth to see perhaps if they have a toxicity or a deficiency, would be more like dental caries. Okay, all right, that is it. We are not going to talk about chromium, even though it's kind of an interesting one to talk about. It is not going to be on the exam. We're not even going to do iodine. So I think we are done. Here's just a little bit more on anemia for those that might have anemia, which normally it's iron deficiency, but even if it's not iron deficiency, it could be like a B12 or some of these other ones. These are just some signs and symptoms of what we call macrocytic anemia, that the larger where the cells are, the red blood cells are just really big. Okay, so I guess I am done for now. I hope that this has given you a better understanding of the vitamins and minerals and how important they are to your body, and how I want you to take this information that you've learned and now apply it to your diet, so that in your diet you can tell me a little bit about these things and how important it is and where you're going to get more of them, and then even if there's toxicity or deficiency, what some of the signs and symptoms are for that. Okay, so thank you so much for your attention. I appreciate it, and I will see you next time.